Thank you so much for joining me today as we explore new features of the NumWorks Graphing Calculator in version 20. My name is Tracy Pratt and I'm a math teacher in residence at NumWorks. I'm very excited to dig into some of the new updates in the applications coming out. Quick overview of what's new in version 20 is that we have added a legend and key points in the grapher. We've added new grapher templates. We've improved our auto zoom. We've added a new elements application. We've improved our units and additional results. We've added the ability to store values from anywhere in the calculator and more. Let's get started in our grapher application. One of the first things you'll notice in version 20 is that we've added some new templates in our Add an Element tab. To begin, we'll look at the first one, which is y equals x. This is going to give you quick access to writing expressions in terms of y equals, which we use often with our young students. You can also just use the empty template and it will default to y equals. For example, using the empty template, I'm going to create a cubic function x cubed minus 6x plus 2. There's also a new piecewise function template. By going to add an element and press OK and scroll down, you'll see our new piecewise template. This allows you to edit your piecewise function. Similar to our matrix template, this will grow as you need it to. So you can add a third row if you need a third piece. But I'm going to simply just edit my two pieces, negative 2x and x squared, and press OK. We'll look at some of our other templates in a moment, but for now let's go down to plot the graph. Here we can see one of my favorite new features of version 20. Automatically, we're displaying key points of your selected curve. Because my cursor is currently on the cubic function, I can use my left and right arrows to navigate to the little black dots that are points of interest. For example, I can stop on this maximum. I can go to this intersection. I can also see this 0. Points of interest are always going to include your intersections, extrema, and your intercepts. I can also use my arrow, up and down arrows, to navigate to my piecewise function and see those interest points as well. The intersection and this point, which is a minimum a 0 and a y-intercept. A common request has been the ability to store the x values from selected points on the curve. Before, we gave users the opportunity to do this, but we've made this easier in version 20. Simply navigate to the point you'd like to store. Then use your Shift key followed by your X to the Y key to create your store value. This will allow you to define a new variable for the X value of the point your cursor was on. Here, I was on that intersection, so I'll use my alpha key followed by my e to the x, or my a key, to define this as a and press execute. Now this value a is stored and can be used across any application. Another feature that got updated in version 20 is our calculate menu. I'm going to first navigate to my cubic function, and then I'm going to press OK to open my calculate menu. Right at the top of our calculate menu, we have editable values for x and y. For example, I can jump directly to the value 0.5 for x. Pressing OK will move my cursor there. Going back into my calculate menu again, I can also edit my values of y. So maybe I'm interested in the y value 4. Hitting execute will move my cursor to the y value 4 and allow me to toggle between all the values in which y is 4. This was our inverse image. We've renamed this to x given y. I'm going to press OK to get out of this and OK again to get back into my calculate menu. In addition to the x and the y, we also have access here to our trusty find menu. This find menu hasn't changed much other than our inverse image is now called x given y. You can still zero in on specific features if you don't want to find all interest points at one time. You can just look at the zeros. But what we've added at the very bottom is brand new. Now we provide users the opportunity to find the area between curves. I'll press OK to demonstrate this. The first thing I want to do is to use that intersection I stored earlier. To use that intersection I stored earlier, I need to remember that I stored this as alpha A, and I'll treat that as my lower bound and hit execute. Because I didn't store my second intersection, but that's the intersection I'd like to use, I'm just going to use my right arrow and toggle to that. One thing about these interest points is that my cursor will always snap to them. So even if I didn't store the intersection, it can still be used. I'll press OK to compute the area between the two curves from the first intersection to the second. Pressing OK and OK again will get me back into my Calculate menu. The last thing that we've added to the Calculate menu is our options. This options is the same options that used to be accessible in expressions, but now we've made it accessible across all tabs. So in our options, you'll see changing the color, toggling on the derivative value, restricting your plot, show the table in the graph, or delete the expression, all from the Graph tab. Backing out of this, we'll see that in my Find menu, because I've toggled on the derivative, not only will we see x and y, but we'll also see y prime. Going back, we'll also see y prime in the bottom banner in the legend of the calculator. Not only will we see y prime in the legend of the Graph tab, we'll also see it in our table. Let's take a look at our updates to our Table tab. Navigate up and over to Table and press OK. Because I turned on my derivative, this is connected from Graph to Table. So not only do I have my y column, but I also have my y prime column as well as my f of x column. Turning off a derivative column is quite simple. Just go up to the column, press OK, and you can hit Hide the Derivative. If you want to turn that back on, you don't have to go to the Graph tab to do so. You can access the same options right from the top of the column. Just press OK, and you'll be on the same options that you were in the Graph tab that you used to have access to only in the Expression tab. Let's back out and look at a few new things in our Let's back out and look at a few other new things in our Expression tab. As before, you can edit these values. I'll go ahead and put in 0.5 for the x value and let that update. Notice that at the moment, these are in decimal form. We can use this new toggle at the top of our table, which is exact results. This exact result toggle will turn the outputs of the functions and equations into exact value form. Before we leave the Graph tab, let's look at a few other templates we've added to our expressions. I'm going to delete my existing equations and hit OK to add an element again. One of the templates that we had before is polar, all the way at the bottom, as we start with now r equals to match most textbooks. But the polar equations will work just like they did in version 19. Let's navigate up to our last new template, an inverse template. This will allow you to graph the inverse of a function. This example says x equals the square root of y. We can edit this expression as needed, and we can even view the graph or the table of values. Let's return to the Expression tab and add a function that has an inverse that we're familiar with. I'm going to use my f of x equals x template. I'm going to clear this out, and I'll use e to the x. Now that I have f of x as e to the x defined, I can use my template that is the inverse, press OK, clear out my square root of y, and I can call f of y, which will be the inverse of f of x. Press your var key to access your function, grab your f of x, and input the variable y using your alpha 3 key, and execute. Now we'll have not only the exponential function graphed, but also we'll have its inverse graphed as well. We can go down and look at the graph of these two functions. For inverses, my auto isn't currently turned on, but one thing you might want to do is make sure your axes are equal. So I'll press OK. That's a great way to see that these two equations are inverses of each other, as they are going to be reflections over the line y equals x. The next app that got a good bit of updates is our Calculation app. Let's hit our Home button and return to our Calculation app and press OK. In version 19, we introduced the ability of percent signs and computations. For example, we could take 75 and decrease it by 20%. Now, when we hit execute in version 20, we'll use a decrease arrow to show that 75 has been decreased by 20%, as well as the correct computation 60. If you want to see a more mathematical representation of this decrease of 20%, simply navigate up to inspect this value so that you can see the full mathematical computation. We've also improved our additional results for some of our outputs. Integers, fractions, and decimals will now display the scientific notation. Evaluating simple functions like the square root will have additional results that show the value on the curve of the function. We've also improved our additional results for trig. For example, I'll do cosine of pi over 6. Trig additional results now show the unit circle with angular graduations, the angle in radians and degrees, the cosine, sine, and now we've added tangent in version 20. Speaking of trig, we've now made it possible to compute trig in degrees even though we're currently in radian mode. For example, I'm going to compute cosine of 30 degrees. To tell the calculator that I want degrees, I'm going to go into my toolbox, navigate down to units and constants, open up length and angle, and open up angle. Here I'll find my options for angles and I'll grab my degree symbol. Now, even in radian mode, computing cosine of 30 degrees will give us the accurate value. While we're discussing units, you may note that units no longer require an underscore, giving you a cleaner screen. We also have additional results for angles that are also available. For example, if I type in 30.5 degrees, going into my toolbox, my place is saved, and press execute, you'll notice that it first offers our conversion as most units do, but in my additional results, we'll also see the degree minute second conversion of 30.5 degrees. Before we totally move away from trig, I want to note that the inverse trig functions now display their full name. For example, pressing Shift Sign will show us the arc sign instead of what was our A sign in computer science language. If you're using your keyboard on the emulator, you can also input sine raised to the -1 power and compute an inverse this way. Hitting execute, you'll notice that we beautify this to the arc sign, as we don't want students to confuse these with the reciprocal trig functions. While I'm mentioning my keyboard, we've also added shortcuts to other things. For example, I can type in SQRT within open parentheses to access my square root. I can also type in d over dx followed by a parentheses to access my derivative, and other shorthand notations that we've improved upon. For example, pi now converts to pi. The last additional result that we've included is an additional result for vectors. To create a vector, I'm going to use Shift E to the X and input my vector 3, -3. Once my vector is inputted, I'll hit execute and show what our additional results for these vectors are. Additional results for vectors will include a drawing of the vector, the magnitude, the unit vector, as well as the angle that it makes with the positive x-axis. Another new update in version 20 is in our toolbox at the very bottom. You'll notice a logic section. This logic section is great for computing logic statements that are true and false in the calculator. For example, if I want to check to see if something is greater than or equal to, I can input values and wonder, is 5 times 7 minus 4 greater than or equal to 0? And press execute to confirm that statement, whether it was true or false. Let's talk about some shortcuts and templates we've added in version 20. You may have noticed before that we only have one negative key. Because of this negative key, it was difficult to subtract from a previous result. For example, I could start with 15 plus 9, hit execute, and then I could use my plus sign to return an answer plus something. Press 3 and execute and do a running computation that way. However, if I wanted to subtract a value, pressing the negative key will immediately interpret I'm using a negative number. To subtract, just press your negative key a second time and this will turn into the answer minus. This will allow you to do quick subtractions from your previous answers. Another shortcut that we've added is a division. Pressing the division key once will allow us to do a quick division of our previous answer. Pressing the division key a second time will give us a fraction template where we can start with our numerator and then go to our denominator. Pressing the division key 3 times, once, twice, 3 times, will open up a mixed fraction format. So with a number in front, I can add 1 and 1/2 as a mixed fraction. This division key will work like a toggle. So it will toggle between answer divided, an empty fraction template, and a mixed fraction template. And I can keep pressing that to toggle through those 3 options. Another new update in version 20 is something that has been asked for a ton. We've added auto parentheses. Let's take a look at some examples. For example, I can do 3 plus 5 times 4 minus 8, and you'll notice a little gray auto parentheses closed. That means I don't have to close that parentheses to execute this value. This also works if I close, it will auto open. For example, I can do 2 plus 3, and if I want to divide that entire quantity by something, I can use a close parentheses, it will auto open, and then I can hit my division key. A few other things that we've added in our toolbox, we're going to access those. Getting out of my logic section. In my calculus section, we've added a nth derivative, so this will now allow you to compute the derivatives of more than just the first derivative. For example, I can compute a third derivative. Changing that power there will change it both for the numerator and denominator, so I could take the third derivative with respect to x 3 times, input my function, and input my value. Another new feature in our toolbox is going to be in our probability section. Under random, we've now added a random integer no repeat. This will start at the integer a and go to the integer b and return n unique values. So for example, if I wanted numbers between 1 and 20, and I want 4 values and hit execute, this will provide me with 4 unique values from 1 to 20. And the last thing that I'll show in our calculation app before we move on to another app is we've added a little bit of help with orders of operations. For example, if I do -5 squared, many students don't understand why this is wrong and that they're not also squaring the negative value. So upon hitting execute, students will get a little bit of a help in their understanding of order of operations. Here, the parentheses show that we're squaring the 5 and then making the value negative. Okay, let's go take a look at our regression application. For time, I've already inputted my data. When I go to the graph tab, we're going to see our scatter plot, but we've added something new to our bottom banner. Not only will you see the X and Y values of your scatter plot as you toggle through your values, we'll also see our correlation coefficient R value right on the screen. Pressing OK will open up our regression options, and a new regression model that we've added in version 20 is the linear A plus BX that's often used in statistical modeling in AP statistics. Pressing OK will add the model like before, and you can trace the scatter plot using your left and right arrows. You can still access onto your curve, where you'll see your X, predicted Y, and your regression model at the bottom. Pressing OK will open your regression option again, and again we've added our R value to make it even easier to see. So not only will they see R squared, but for linear models we'll also see R. The last applications that we will talk about are new applications that have been added to NumWorks. Before, the equation application was both the equation and the financial solver. These two apps have been split so that equation has its own app and the finance has its own app as well. Another split that we've done is we have divided our statistical distributions and inferences into their own applications as well. They still have all the same great features, they'll just have their own apps. And our last new app is the Elements app. This is our periodic table. In this periodic table, you'll see a color-coded periodic table that allows you to explore the periodic table and learn more facts. For instance, I can use my navigate key to find an element that I'm interested in. Pressing OK will open facts about that, including the atomic number, mass, molar, and many, many more facts. From this screen, if I want to navigate between elements, my plus and minus key will increase and decrease my atomic number. So I can go to the next element and the previous element using those two keys on the periodic table. Going back to my periodic table view, you'll notice that in the bottom banner, you'll see the family. That's because we default to color coding by family, but this isn't our only option. Let's navigate down to the 3 dots. Pressing OK will open our options. Here, you can display your periodic table based on different properties of the elements. For example, if I wanted to look at the boiling point of all of the elements in the periodic table, I can press OK, and now my periodic table is color-coded by boiling points, where the deeper the red, the higher the boiling point, and the less red has lower boiling points. Going back to our home screen, I want to make sure you know about some of our easy shortcuts. The number pad will give you quick access to the big first 9 applications. For example, pressing 1 twice will open your calculation app. Pressing 0 twice will open your settings. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. Please leave your questions below in the comment, or you can always email us at contact@numworks.com.